Well, here I am at the rink, because that's what the members of the Salvation Army call this Regent Hall here in Oxford Street, because it used to be a skating rink before they took it over in 1882. Mind you, on a night like tonight, you could probably skate in the streets. The most sensible place to be at this moment is at home, snugly tucked up in bed. Sadly, there are hundreds of people around here who've got no homes and no beds to go to. They're going to be out all night, sleeping rough. So every night of the year, from one of its centres in London, the Salvation Army soup run team set out in search of these lonely characters. They've been boiling the soup up now for about an hour and a half, and they're ready for the off. I'm going with them, so I'll leave you with the band and rescue the perishing. William Booth will be glad to see that his soldiers were still showing this kind of concern, but he would be sad to discover that it was still necessary. Because this is exactly what he saw 100 years ago, one cold wintry morning as his cab clattered across London Bridge on his way back from Kent. Later on that day, he barked at his son Bramwell. "Did you know about this, Bramwell?" "Well, yes." "Well, do something about it. Get a warehouse, warm it, something to cover 'em up. But mind, Bramwell, no coddling." Booth demanded reports from his 10,000 Salvation Army officers across the country. They convinced him that problems were not confined to London. At least 3 million people were living in appalling destitution. They rotted in evil-smelling slums. They were sick and hungry, and either had no work or sweated impossible hours for a few pence. How you doing? All right. Booth, with an unerring sense of the dramatic, demanded a cab horse charter. Every cab horse in London enjoyed decent food, shelter, and work. No human being should have less. The book that was all the rage in polite society at the time was Henry Morton Stanley's In Darkest Africa. This account of the explorer's adventures had become a bestseller. Well, Booth quickly latched onto that and brought out his own book called In Darkest England and the Way Out. And in it, he set out the grim facts of poverty, together with his own solutions. Well, the impact was electric. But not everybody approved. Punch actually made fun of him. They nicknamed him Field Marshal von Booth. Others denounced him as a pious rogue, a tub-thumping hypocrite.
The man didn't understand. They were born scroungers who just didn't want to work.
And the first and only reason for running a business is to make a profit.
And what was more, people should be free to run their own lives.
But no one could teach Booth anything about human nature. When he started his food houses and hostels up and down the country, Booth became aware of one basic principle. The poor did not want perpetual handouts. They needed food and accommodation at prices they could afford. And though it might not be much, the fact that they paid something retained their self-respect. But there were, of course, those so dirty, deprived, and degraded that they'd already lost it. Booth and his Salvationists had one very good piece of news for them. You can't stop God from loving you. That goes for all of us. This is Bryant and May's factory on Merseyside. It's the only match factory in Britain. In Booth's day, there was a large number of small manufacturers, and it was still a cottage industry of the poor. When Booth was writing Darkest England, he discovered something very different from what you'll find here. This is obviously a very pleasant and agreeable place to work. What's more, it's 100% healthy. Now, this stuff contains phosphorus sesquisulfite, and it's used for making matches safe. Every day, millions of matchsticks or splints are dipped in this and then dried off slowly on belts before being put in the boxes. Now, these have to be struck against a specially prepared strip on the side of the box before they'll burst into flame. Now, the Victorians liked matches that would strike anywhere. These were made of yellow or white phosphorus. Now, whereas I could stand here all day without any ill effects, Booth's investigators found that workers inhaling this yellow phosphorus all day in cramped and confined conditions faced an excruciating peril. It started with severe toothache, and then if you turned the gas light down in a darkened room, the sufferer's face would glow with a ghosty greeny light as the phosphorus ate into the jaw. Now, this condition was known to doctors as phosphorus necrosis. The workers gave it the nickname of Fossy Jaw. It always ended in death. Booth knew that these deaths were cruel and unnecessary. Dangerous substances did not have to be used in the making of safety matches. So in 1891, as part of a campaign for industrial reform, Booth opened his own match factory in East London. There, in bright and airy conditions, 120 workers turned out 6 million boxes of matches a year without any risk to health. And what did he call the matches? Right. Lights in Darkest England. Each box summed up the work of the Salvation Army. Our work is for God and humanity. Bear one another's burdens. 2 years after Booth's venture began, a Royal Commission reported on phosphorus poisoning. When the match trade got its house in order so that everybody could work in safety, Booth closed his factories down. Well, strike a light. I mean, they'd done their job, hadn't they? The General lit a light in darkest England. He heard the little children when they cried. The light the General lit in darkest England, they never could put out, although they tried.
So strike a light for darkest England, stab its conscience wide awake. For still it's dark in darkest England, strike a light for Jesus' sake. So strike a light for darkest England, stab its conscience wide awake. For still it's dark in darkest England, strike a light for Jesus' sake.
The General loved the working class of England. The poor he made his extra special care. He fought for all the underdogs in England. The General was the answer to their prayers.
So strike a light for darkest England, stab its conscience wide awake. For still it's dark in darkest England, strike a light for Jesus' sake. So strike a light for darkest England, stab its conscience wide awake. For still it's dark in darkest England, strike a light for Jesus' sake.
The General had a dream for darkest England. He dreamt of better health and houses too. He dreamt of better homes and better people. We've got to make the General's dream come true.
So strike a light for darkest England, stab its conscience wide awake. For still it's dark in darkest England, strike a light for Jesus' sake. So strike a light for darkest England, stab its conscience wide awake. For still it's dark in darkest England, strike a light for Jesus' sake. Strike a light for Jesus' sake.
When William Booth bought 3,000 acres of farmland on the Essex marshes, Hadley Castle was thrown in with it. It was an important stronghold for Edward III in his defence of the Thames estuary, but under William Booth, it formed part of an all-out attack on unemployment. Ruined lives could be rescued by work. Now, the Salvation Army had begun adding labour yards to their hostels where unemployed carpenters made Salvation Army benches and redundant cobblers repaired army boots. 20 years before the government thought of it, William Booth opened Britain's first labour exchange, which was soon finding over 10,000 jobs a year. But more was needed, and Booth was not lacking in ideas. Down there, past Southend, the Thames meets the sea, and beyond that lies what used to be an ever-expanding empire. In Africa, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, there were millions of acres just waiting to be farmed. But it was no use plonking a raw city dweller in the middle of an open prairie. So Hadley became a farm colony, where men and women could learn the basic agricultural skills before going out to settlements overseas. Empire builders like Cecil Rhodes came to Hadley. Eminent politicians like the young Winston Churchill showed interest. But William Booth couldn't persuade the politicians to give him all the overseas territories that he wanted. Nevertheless, over 250,000 people emigrated with the help of the army, many of them trainees from Hadley. Booth's work continues today. Plans are in hand to make the farm a residential training centre for 100 unemployed people. Everything is being pressed into service. The old emigrant hostel is being refurbished, and even this will be transformed into a modern workshop complex. Farm manager Peter Howard and his wife have been here 34 years. Have there been any changes whilst you've been here?
Yes, we used to do probation boys, and then that phased out, and we done a few alcoholics, and then for a number of years we upgraded the farm, and the social side was non-existent.
And now you've got some exciting new things happening. What pleases you most about it?
Well, I think the thing that pleases me most is obviously that William Booth started this type of work 100 years ago, and it looks as though it's gone full circle, and we should be back in exactly the same type of work as what he started it with.
Men and women who are never short of a job are the members of the local band. Here, the Hadley Temple Corps march to the medley, Exeter Temple. Today, when there's wide Christian concern for the inner cities, Hadley typifies the approach of many churches and chapels. Thousands of jobs have been created through organisations like Church Action with the Unemployed. And another thing, these days, all the major churches are involved in practical ways of dealing with alcoholism. There are, for example, many drop-in centres offering advice and help. But the Salvationists in Swindon have latched on to a new way of approaching the problem. Actually, the idea was around when Booth fought the evils of drink 100 years ago. But he never started a pub with no beer, where folk can enjoy all the friendly informality of a pub without the lure of alcohol.
How about that, Nano?
I thought it would have been a short. Captain Derek Tyrrell, who started the venture, believes that the dangers of alcohol are very much underestimated. So what are the alcohol problems around here?
The problems actually, of course, are far greater than just around here, Roy. Senior citizens, a big problem with alcohol abuse and senior citizens. Then, of course, we have the young people. Now, we think in terms of young people, but I'm talking about 4- and 5-year-olds that I've seen drunk. You know, real problem. And did you know, Roy, that this year, over 1,000 young people will die through the effects of alcohol in one way or another here in Britain? We have set up a campaign in the town called the Kick It campaign. And the basic idea is that we want to set up a film, we want to set up literature where we can go to schools and colleges and present the actual facts to them in a film and then have a talk-back situation. And we're not really aiming at the kind of 15, 16 and 17-year-olds. We're going to be aiming at the 8, 9 and 10-year-olds. Because the fact is, at that age, they're being introduced. And I think a lot of people in society out there are saying, ah, come on now. But I'm telling you, that is something we ought to look at.
Devending means the turning point. I went to Holland to look at ways of combating the problem. An alcohol-free zone. This is one of many alcoholic rehabilitation centres run worldwide by the Army. Men who've been through a detoxification programme to get the alcohol out of their system, an Army speciality, are given hostel care and farm work or workshop experience to help them resume a normal life. But is something more drastic needed? Derek, you've been teetotal all your life now. Would you like to see a teetotal world?
I suppose, you know, if I was to be realistic about the whole thing, I see, you know, as a Christian myself, that it's something that I don't do because of the fact that I am a Christian, a Salvationist. But there are many people who are Christians, converted people, who find that they can drink and they can find their relationship with the Lord, you know, it's fine, it isn't harmed. But I like to feel that when someone comes to me and says to me, look, I've got a problem, then I can just say for myself, now look, I don't drink, I never have drunk, but you know, you too can find joy and happiness, just as I found it, without having to have the trappings of drink.
Earlier on, we saw members of the Regent Hall Corps taking soup to the destitute while the city slept. Now they declare salvation to the crowds in London's West End as they march to their regular open-air meetings.
where there was a man who was suffering from a dreaded skin disease. When he saw Jesus, he threw himself down and begged him, "Sir, if you want to, you can make me clean." Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him. "I do want to," he answered. "Be clean."
Now here's something. An open-air meeting for children, led by children. Meetings are all part of Sunday, and in the army there are many kinds.
And now for the conclusion of our meeting this morning, shall we sing the benediction?
Lord, bless this house, and all who dwell herein. May each find refuge beneath thy all sheltering wing.
In every Salvation Army hostel, there's always a place set aside for prayer. The residents don't have to attend the worship, but there are always those who do. And it emphasizes William Booth's real concern. Men and women needed more than just a cab horse deal of food, shelter, and work. They needed God. You didn't turn a bad person into a good person just by altering the conditions in which they live. Only God can change people. In the end, God is the real reason for helping the poor and needy, because Jesus had said, "Whatever you do for them, you do for me." So for William Booth and his followers then, as for Mother Teresa and her sisters today, and for all true Christians, it's the love of God that inspires the love of others.